According.
Yimi.
The Chofetz Chaim tries to explain all the reasons why people don't get involved in lending money. So he has another one. Person says, I only have a certain reserve of cash. And if I lend the money to this party, something may come up and I may need it to purchase inventory, or a certain deal may come up and I need the money to put into a deal. At this point, no deal's on the table. But yet in his mind, he says, you never know, that deal may present itself. So he says, the Chofetz Chaim, if it would be a long-term loan, okay, maybe. Because if you give the money long-term, over that extended period of time, something may present itself. What about if it's a short-term loan? That concern is not a concern. Short-term loan. And what about if it's a small amount of money? Also, it's not going to make a difference. That small amount of money is not going to make a difference whether you can make that investment or not. And what about, he says, the man is a wealthy man, and he has the means to make the investment and also to lend. He says, but you realize there's so many multiple investments I could make. Therefore, I want to have the money to make every investment which presents itself. So Chofetz Chaim says, if that's the case, the mitzvah to lend money to a fellow Jew has no relevance, because you could always be concerned that something may come up and you'll need the money to put it into that. He says, if you need the money to cover your expenses, that's your livelihood, is one thing. But it's not only livelihood. You need to say, to become wealthy or wealthier, is that a reason not to do a mitzvah? It's unjustified. Okay? That's another approach. Another thing is, if you lend money, what happens? Word gets out. Once word gets out, what happens? You have a line at your door. Everybody wants to borrow money from you. So therefore you say, something, why create a problem if I don't have to create the problem? That's number one. And he says, if that's the case, maybe a person shouldn't give tzedakah, shouldn't give charity. Because if you give charity, people hear that you give charity, people also, they're going to line up your door. If that's the case, you could shut down the charity. But he says, you want to know something? There's a way to avoid all these problems. Give it over to a third party that the borrower shouldn't know that you're the lender, and it's lent anonymously. So if that's the case, what's your excuse now? What's the reason why you're not doing the mitzvah? The Chofetz Chaim has the ability to respond and deflect every reason why the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, tries to discourage us from doing a mitzvah. He's explained to you why it's a false pretense, it's based on nothing, and it's unexcusable. All these reasons that he just presented, each one is flawed, and therefore, ultimately, if you reflect on it, understand and appreciate the level of responsibility, obligation, and the consequence if you don't, because today you have, and because you're not willing to help the poor man, God forbid, you could be in the place of the poor man rather than being the one who has the ability to help the poor person. That's the Chofetz Chaim. He says something interesting. It comes to tefillin, people put out money to buy tefillin, which is very admirable. Lulav, you only want the best lulav. We do mitzvahs. We provide for our Shabbos. When it comes to lending money, for some reason, although it's a very important mitzvah, a positive mitzvah, an obligation, but yet people, for some reason, are lax, and they'll come up with endless excuses why not. For instance, he gives examples. You meet somebody in the street, and he says, by the way, I came to your home, I wanted to borrow some money, you weren't there. So the person says, if I would have been home, I would have lent you. But you realize I don't have money with me, and I'm on the street. You should have come to my home. So it's your fault. So he says, but maybe you have time. We could go back now. He says, no, I'm too busy right now. Too busy. Okay. And then he'll say that, I don't want to give a loan unless it's documented. We have to get a scribe to write up a contract, a document that you owe the money. Because lending you money without a document, it's being irresponsible. He'll have every reason under the sun, the lender, not to lend. But yet, and we're not talking about big amounts of money, but yet, if a business investment comes up, the person says, by the way, you meet a person in the street, he says, I was in your office, you weren't there, I having a business opportunity. And the person says, you do? Let's go back to my office, we'll talk about it. So to go back to talk about the business opportunity, and maybe you'll make, it's questionable whether you make a profit or you're not going to make a profit. You may even lose your money. And how often do you lose your money? But yet, without any hesitation, you're going to go back and you're going to want to hear about it. And you have a strong interest in it. And there, it's questionable whether there's a profit. And there isn't the question, there may be a loss. When it comes to lending money, which is a valuable mitzvah, and the return is guaranteed, we have every reason why it's not the right time, it's too burdensome, I don't have the scribe, some other time, I'm not liquid, I'm not fluid, everything under the sun. So he says something interesting. He says, maybe the reason is, because again, Chofetz Chaim wants to put a Jew in the most positive light. Why not? Because we don't appreciate the degree of obligation there is to lend money to a fellow Jew. That's the reason. He says, but maybe you should open up the Shulchan Aruch or consult with a rabbi and ask him. Person says, something. The evil English says, better not know, because if you don't know, you have an excuse. It was inadvertent. If you know all the aspects and all the details of the obligation and you don't, there's a greater degree of culpability. So if that's the case, he convinces you, better don't study that area. Of course, there's a principle in the Talmud, better you should violate inadvertently than deliberately. Sounds pretty convincing. However, the Talmud tells us that's only by a rabbinic law. By a Torah law, you have an obligation to what? If you're able to come upon the knowledge, you have an obligation. And he says there's a beautiful allegory. A person's told that he has to travel in a certain location, and there are many potholes and pitfalls. And as he goes, he could really be hurt. Maybe it's a good idea not to make the trip. So the person says, something? If you give me a cloth of a certain size, I think I can make the trip. So the person asks him, how do you make the trip? If factually it's fraught with problems, and you could be harmed because you fall into one of these pits, or the wagon could break its axle, what is the cloth going to help you? He says, no problem. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put a blindfold on. I won't notice the pitfalls, and I'll fall in. But at least I can't be held accountable for falling in the pit because I didn't see the pit. Yeah. The Chofetz Chaim says, a man talks like that, the man, it's like he left his brains somewhere. Are you talking reality? Or are you talking something else? Which planet did you land? Right? What kind of foolishness is this? I'm not going to go and learn the law. So when God asked me why I didn't do something which she doesn't done, he goes, what? I prefer to put my head in the sand. I prefer not to open the book. But if you could have opened the book and you could have consulted and known what it is, it's like putting your blindfold on. I prefer not to see. The person is just as culpable as if he knew and he rejected to do the mitzvah, no less than that. There's a law that if a Torah scholar comes within you 4 cubits, you have to stand up to acknowledge his presence, that he's a special person, because he possesses Torah knowledge. What happens if you see the person coming 20 feet away? And by the time he comes to within your proximity, your 4 cubits, you're going to put your head in the book, and you're going to make believe you don't see him, and you don't. So you're trying to evade the reality that when he comes within your Daled Amos, within your 4 cubits, you're not going to notice him. But factually, he's going to be there. I prefer not to notice. The Torah says, to others, it may appear that the reason why you didn't stand and acknowledge him because you weren't aware. But God knows the truth. But you have to fear God because God knows the truth. God knows your intention. God knows what's in your heart. That the only reason why you immerse yourself in the book is because you don't want to acknowledge that Torah scholar. The same thing here. I didn't know. Some people, truly, they don't know. They didn't have the means to know. They're so disconnected. But people who are sufficiently connected and they understand what they should do, but they prefer not to research it or to ask. You know something? Unexcusable. It's the person who puts the blindfold and he doesn't want to fall into the pits, into the pitfalls, but he falls into the pitfalls. You know, person's a young man and he thinks he knows it all. And when he plays, he gambles for the 2-3 cents, he wins every pot. So he figures, you know, he's the expert in gambling. He goes to a casino, and now he's going to gamble for big stakes. You know, you can afford to lose 2-3 cents when you were a young man. What's at stake today is a lot more than 2-3 cents. You're playing. This is the big time, and to be able to gamble there, even if you're an expert, you're probably going to lose. So as the novice, there's no question. They're going to fleece you over there. You're going to end up with nothing. It's the same idea. You know, you're a grown adult. I didn't know. Ignorance doesn't excuse it from the law, especially where you could have known and you could have consulted. And just as a Jew, another person is asking you to do him a favor, and you could do the favor. Why are you turning your back on him if you could help him? And he says, all the reason you want to give, we're able to respond. You don't want people to know you have money. You don't want people to bother you. Know something? Take a person, pay him a small fee, and today they're funds, free loan societies. You give them the money. You don't have to be involved. And whenever you want the money, they'll give it back to you. This. Yeah, I'm involved in Israel on many levels. And people there, unfortunately, as people here, are in need of many things. And when my wife passed away, Allah Shalom, I set up a free loan society, a free loan fund in a certain community in Israel, which the community was comprised mostly of people, didn't have very much. And it was going to be a fund that 2 communities could borrow from this fund. I put a certain amount of money into the fund, memory of my wife. The fund is named after my wife in her memory. And I asked other people to participate, okay? The fund itself, the free loan, we started with $50,000 in the fund. Other people, today the fund has $2 million in it. It's free loan society, free loan fund. For these people, what does it provide for? People that are people of means, person has to make a wedding for his daughter. Doesn't have the money. So he borrows a certain amount just to be able to approach the idea of making a wedding. Then he'll add to the base amount, or he needs a little more to fully cover the wedding. So they can borrow $5,000, $10,000 from the loan, from the fund, and they do. This fund lends the $10 million a year is lent from this fund for bar mitzvah, for a bris, for a wedding, for whatever else, for medical issues, whatever is lent. $2 million $10 million a year from the $2 million. The fund is in effect exists for 12 years and never lost a dollar. Never lost a dollar. That's how responsible it's run. You have to have a guarantor, you have to give collateral, whatever it is, and you're not going to pull at the heartstring of these people. Because if you don't do it right, ultimately, you're not going to have any money to lend because people are not going to pay. That's what it is. Many of the people contributed to the 2 million. Many gave the money, not to want it back. Other people said, look, I have $100,000. I'll park it in your fund and you could use it because I don't need it. When I need it, just give me 30, I'll give you 30 days notice. Give me my money back. So there's about $500,000 in the fund, which people did this. Whenever they want that money, they'll get the money back. They get the money back. So it's not they're giving it away forever. They're not getting a tax deduction because they gave it. The money's being used to do the mitzvah of lending. But look at the mileage they're getting on it. That money that's being lent, as long as they don't take it back, it's generating mitzvahs, helping poor people, for Shabbos, for bar mitzvahs, for bris, for wedding, whatever it may be, to make ends meet, for Yom Tov. That's what it is. So all the reasons, here it's being done, nobody knows who put money in that fund. It's being lent by, it's called whatever the fund is. It's a community fund, a communal free loan fund. You don't have to be busy with it. Whenever you want it, you're going to get your money back. So if you want to do the investment, the money's available for your investment. You want it for whatever it's for your vacation, you're welcome to take the money. They don't ask you why you want your money back. You give it, I give you 2 weeks, 30 days notice, you get your money back. And that's the way it's done. So the way this is set up, and it generates mitzvahs continuously on behalf of whoever put money, although it's not a bona fide loan. You're lending your money, but you're going to get it back, and you can even take it out altogether if you choose to take it out. It's a win-win on every level. Every reason why you shouldn't. I can't be bothered with it. I don't want people to know. I don't want this. I need the money available. Every reason which the evil inclination come up and whisper in your ear why you should not, every reason has no relevance. So what's the only reason you could say? I could take that money and put it into an investment. Into an investment. So at one time when you were able to get 8% at the bank, 7% at the bank, maybe. What are you going to get at the bank? What, you can get 0.5%? Well, I can put it into treasury notes, and what are you going to get? So you're going to pass on a mitzvah where every reason why you should do it, should not do it, doesn't apply. So to make an extra few dollars, and we're not talking about an enormous amount of money we're talking about you're going to lend, you're going to forego a mitzvah to make an extra few dollars a year. That's it's unacceptable. How do you pass on the mitzvah? Which is so valuable, especially when you're helping another person. So by creating these kinds of funds, these communal funds, you've actually shut the door in the face of the evil inclination. Every reason of discouragement, he's actually proven that it's a baseless position.